Hello, hello, and welcome back. Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Another beautiful episode coming up today. Today, I'm chatting with Marie Antoinette Kelley, who is an intuitive artist, and she's done some amazing, beautiful artworks, some of which you're going to see as I'm chatting with Marie Antoinette today. She has also created a book around near-death experiences for children. And I thought this was such an important conversation to have because I get many requests, mostly by email, people asking me, how do I talk about death with my child? Or my child has such a fear of death that it's holding them back. They're not able to manage at school, or they're struggling with family issues because we lost somebody or somebody's unwell. And I just felt like Marie Antoinette's work really filled in a piece of the puzzle around talking to children about death. And I think when we talk to children about death, we simplify things quite well, which means that we also get a better understanding. So she's written this beautiful book called Danny's Day in Heaven, and it's about a boy called Danny, obviously, who has a near-death experience, and it opens up the topic around spiritual experiences, near-death experiences, but also death in a really beautiful way that we can share with children. So I'm very excited to hear more of the story. Marie Antoinette Kelley, welcome along to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast.
Hi, Kirsty. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness.
It's a wonderful opportunity to be here.
Thank you. I'm really excited. If you're watching the video version, I'm just so excited to look at the beautiful artwork behind you.
Caught my attention right away because your introduction was so beautiful and eloquent. And I caught you saying that the two things that it helps children, this book helps children with death, but also in having to simplify it for children, we got to understand the topic so much more personally. And I would love to talk about that because that's where I feel that all my growth has been. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. Let's do it. My question for you was going to be, why did you write the book? I assume some of that overlaps into the answer right there. So let's start right at the beginning. Why
I suppose
death?
I jumped the gun, but I related to your introduction because you said you're being contacted frequently by parents who want to talk about this subject with their children. And I was such a child. That's where it started. I was a child that was petrified of death, and I couldn't understand why, but I was just real sensitive to what lays beyond our experiences, our physical experiences. And this is back in the day, before the internet, before we really had all this. Right now we have a lot of information at our fingertips, but back then we just had your religion that you grew up in, and there weren't practical insights or answers. My parents were really supportive, but they didn't really know why I was asking all the questions that I was asking and why I was so scared of death. And I feel that black hole that I had about not having real answers or insights, and somebody saying, look, this is what you can count on, because people around the world have experienced a brush with death, and they are now the near-death survivors that we now know as the stories. And back then that wasn't there, so I couldn't have the insights, and it became a looming problem. Like, when was it going to strike? Who was it going to get? And how could I relate to it? And it was the burden for me as a child. So all through my life, I was waiting and looking for the right time to get that topic out there. It was like a personal mission of my own. Just as an adult, I was able to kind of outgrow that fear, because it set me on this whole path of having, my questions answered. What happens when we die? And what is the purpose of life? The deeper philosophical questions that you're really not supposed to touch on as a child yet. But as an adult, I was getting my answers, and I was able to become friends with Dannion Brinkley, crossed my path. And he is someone, I don't know if you know of him, but he's someone who has had one of the first and most complete near-death experiences on record. He had his in 1975, his first one. He's been several times to the other side with memories coming back. But so his story is written in the book Saved by the Light, and it's for grown-ups. And when we became friends, I had a chance to discuss that with him. I said, you've changed my life so much by giving me empirical evidence that what I've always intuited and what I know is, bigger than the life we're living here and is out there. You touched it. You came back with a story to validate it for us, in a way that was really comforting. And I said, how come we don't tell this to our children? How come it's only for grown-ups who have already struggled and wrestled with the topic? But it's the children that I feel would benefit from the comfort of knowing what they're intuitively aware of or what they're experiencing. Many children have lots of spiritual experiences because their intuitive side is so awake. give them the context, give them the confidence that, life does go on. So you never lose who or what you love, because there is a continuum that we can understand and relate to right here and right now. And that was the first moment. And I'll let you talk some more.
No,
Here I am just talking.
it's brilliant. I love it.
Okay.
I just resonate so much with what you're talking about, and you've got me
Mm-hmm.
thinking, is it,
Mm-hmm.
you said at one point we didn't really talk about it with children,
No.
and you had your church, your belief system, or your religion, or what your family followed growing up, and that's all that there was.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, I go, oh, technology's played a massive part in getting the
Right.
stories out there for a start, so we understand there are
Mm-hmm.
different things going on, but also just to widen that conversation and make it available to children. And you
Mm-hmm.
think of like PMH Atwater, all of her beautiful
Mm-hmm.
work looking at
Right.
children's near-death experiences. And
Yeah.
yeah, I was
One thing
thinking,
that I think she highlighted for me, because I was only just recently introduced to her based on my children's book, and she actually wrote an endorsement of the book,
yeah, I saw that.
which is really great, because there's all these really educated experts in the field who relate that I have with the book, even though I have not had an official near-death experience. I've been in touch with the other side and processed it and come to terms with it on my own, to such an extent that the book is accurate for those who have had
Mm,
a near-death experience, so that as you bring it to your children, you're not giving them yet another, fantasy or imagination. And I'm saying that because I think that's where the topic of death has been for children.
mm,
If they have spiritual experiences, very often it's relegated to the realm of make-believe or wishful thinking or processing stress, but it's really an actual encounter for children to
mm,
the spiritual realm and these questions. And I think life has progressed through technology also, because the boundaries have begun to blend. Our religious traditions are
mm,
starting to be exposed to each other, and we see overlap, and we begin discussions that are more about the spirituality behind the traditions, so that we have that common language. And I think from that, our society is also, having dealt with so much, of the topic of death through the recent cycle of the pandemic and everything. And I think in general, people are just more introduced to all of these questions. And because the stories are out there, I think we're ready to discuss this with our
mm,
children. Do you
mm.
agree?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
do. I think it's
Yeah.
such an important part, and in the work that I do, and I have a lot of conversations around death and dying, and so often we come to the conclusion that it's almost like children are protected from death. We keep them at a distance,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially in, I guess, Western world. We keep them
Hmm.
at a distance from death to protect them and to save, or I guess, reduce the emotional
Yeah.
turmoil that they go through.
Yeah.
But imagine if we could just include children in death every day. And that's a very
Yes.
generalistic comment. I know there are many people who embrace
Yeah.
it with their children, but
And it is
generally,
such a broad topic, and you can't generalize, but I think for the large part, it does have to do with the fact that our societies have become so materialistic, and we like to maximize everything we can squeeze out of life for our senses, for our physical experience, rather than the way I believe it naturally is meant to be, that we it's like a yin and a yang. I believe that spirit is to matter the way yin is to yang, and that you are supposed to, have a deep physical experience that then culminates in a deep spiritual experience, and that, those two go together as two halves of a whole. And that's kind of lost in our current society, because
mm,
science has debunked God, and like with Nietzsche's philosophies taking hold, and science just being so rational, and people just losing a lot of context there, and thereby focusing on the materialistic side of our life. And that's I believe, one large reason why we just kind of escape the topic with children, to keep them more of a physical experience that they can enjoy. But I actually believe that if you understand death and see it as a natural part of life, you can enjoy your physical life more, because you don't have
yeah,
that ceiling
yeah,
hanging over your head where you feel like it's going to come crashing down at some moment, which I suppose I experienced as a child. But other people out there have that same feeling, like death is something to avoid and something to not
oh,
mention, so that you
yeah,
can forget it's hanging over your head
yeah,
until it comes crashing in. And then what? Well, let's get rid of it as quickly as you can to go back to our activities. But really, if you understand its place, and how, like in the book, it describes the beauty of the transformation of your physical self to your spiritual self. It has a very different effect on you, and it frees you up to live your life as you. I saw that you do that, like how to have a more meaningful life and make your life worthwhile before you die, so that
Oh,
you're
yeah.
ready for your death and feel complete.
Yeah, absolutely. And I come across a lot of
Yeah.
people who are so afraid of death that it does control their life. And it's really sad for me when
Yeah.
it's children, because children don't necessarily get the opportunities or don't know how to express what they're feeling to be able to move beyond the fear. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I think your work resonates with me so much. Now, I've got a couple of questions for
Thank you.
you. Um,
Yeah.
One is you've got the beautiful artwork next to you, which for our video watchers, this is the cover of the book. So
Yeah,
Danny's
I have
Day
the
in
book here
Heaven.
actually.
Oh, look at that.
I,
There we go.
I
Danny's
brought
Day
a
in
little
Heaven.
copy. Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's
Uh,
gorgeous.
Thank
You
you.
you were talking about how Dannion Brinkley changed your perspective and how he had a great impact on your life. Is he
Yes.
Danny? Is Danny named
Yeah, I
after
based it on him.
Dannion?
I ran it by him and I said, there's so many elements in your story, I was telling Daniel, that are really profound when you are coming to terms with the near-death experience. Because his is not the only story that I'm referring to or that I read since then. I've also studied Raymond Moody's work, Life After Life,
Yeah.
and, Betty Eady, and many of these prominent stories. But what I really stands out for me in his story is that he was a self-described bad guy. He genuinely was a selfish person that, he grew up in
Yeah.
the Bible Belt and he had rejected it all. And he says, if anyone was deserving to go to hell, it would have been me. And yet he didn't. He went to a realm of untold, unconditional love and spirituality that then transformed, and it affected his heart in a way that he changed his entire, life purpose. And I felt that was a really important ingredient. So I based it on his character. And so he is Danny. It's not his story, but it's based on his story. And so I have like a painting, and he gave me a picture of himself in sixth grade. And so I turned that into a
Look
portrait.
at that.
And so, but the idea is that in his book, he is a bully. And so, as a bully, again, I wanted to touch on that concept that you don't bargain your way into heaven. It's not because you're doing good that you can now get your ticket and get in the door. It's because we're all powerful spiritual beings and that we have, all of us, the ability to create love and to create these spiritual qualities that we feel on the other side right here and now. And that you don't earn access to it, but you're affected by it, so that you become a naturally good person. You become someone that wants to share the love and to feel the power of that love um, after you've touched it. And that's one of the reasons why he is the foundational character of the book.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. I wondered that when I saw the name connection and I saw that he'd been
Yeah,
involved and you'd had some journey with him. Absolutely
yeah.
amazing. How has the book, how's it been received by children?
I have mostly in this cycle it's been out having to deal with adults, but
Yeah.
the children love it because they, like you said, children, unless they are like children like me that have had a worry about death, for them it's a great relief, and they begin to obviously open the doors. I have already in my circles children that are already aware of it, so the their main reaction is just a celebration, like, oh, there's golden land. It puts the color, it's almost like turning on the TV in their inner world. It turns the color and it turns the dial to that, what they have already been aware of as life goes on. But adults also, they're saying, the ones that I've mostly talked about, the adults, are saying that the children are just natural to this book. That's what I've always felt, that if they are allowed to naturally understand there's a continuum, they just roll with it and they just move forward. And then adults themselves are reading the book. They're telling each other, every man, woman, and child on the planet needs to read this. And I've had people say this needs to be part of the school curriculum, all
That's
for
what I was
that
thinking.
reason. Yeah,
Yeah.
just to get the discussion to break open, because the book is non-denominational. So it doesn't say, it doesn't enter the field of religion saying, it's going to be Christ that you meet or Buddha that you meet, but it's a being of light, and it's obviously often of a religious or spiritual nature, because that's the whole language of the other side. But
Mm.
it allows for a person's cultural background or their own beliefs to add to the book, where it just follows the steps that people who have had experience with death and been resuscitated have come back with. And these overlapping elements transcend cultural religious background, and they're showing the steps that we can expect ourselves to happen when we die. So that's what the book focuses on, so that it opens the door for the discussion. It takes away the fear, and it takes away that black hole, that death is the end. It's this brick wall. You're going to hit it, and you better maximize what you got, because that's the last you'll ever see of them. And it's, like I said, it's not fantasy or make-believe, because first of all, at this point, I think the statistics are 1 in 25 people, I believe, have had some experience with a near-death experience or with the other side. So people are beginning to verify for themselves the reality of the continuum. But also that brick wall that we're allowed to, or that we've been kind of living. Our understanding of death has been very physical. It's been very much from the material side of things. You know, we're with people and then they die and then they're gone. And that is our experience on the physical side of things, because they do disappear. But knowing that you transcend yourself and that you transform into a spiritual essence, you know, like science says, energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just changes. And so we change into our spiritual selves, and knowing then that that is a valid experience and a real something we can really count on. We can continue the connection, and we just can adjust so that we never really lose who we love, but we can learn to connect to them in new ways that don't deny the fact that, you know, we lost them in the physical, but that continue the conversation in our heart. So the pain is often transcended in a way that the healing happens faster, the grief goes away, the trust that this person is still part of your life, if you have lost them physically, is, I think, one of the great benefits from understanding that death is not the end, so that your scars, you know, get smaller, your worries and your losses kind of get a new perspective, and that's a healing angle that I believe people will benefit from.
Absolutely. I think it's fabulous. I think we need to start the conversation much earlier in life. I think it needs to be everywhere. I just think it's great. Now, you mentioned that you haven't had a near-death experience yourself, but you have had some spiritual experiences. You said you've had contact with the other side or some experience. Are you happy to share more about your personal spiritual journey?
Sure. Yeah, I feel like I'm able to take this in so many different directions. Like you said, death is just such a big topic.
It's
you know, we
huge.
cannot.
Yeah,
it is, and like I said, it's so fresh because we haven't spoken much about it. But as a child, I am now aware, having studied PMH Atwater's work, who studied children between 0 and 5 that have had near-death experiences. And one thing that really caught my attention when what she mentions is that when an adult has a near-death experience and a brush with death and return of it, what they have to integrate is their experience while they were physically dead. And it's overwhelming for them to realize that there's this spiritual realm in which you are fully alive and greeted with unconditional love, and that you have all your senses in a very intuitive way awake. And when they come back, they begin to realize, you know, how dull life is without that context, right? And how much more, and they have to integrate. And she said that's a big journey, but most of them integrate somewhere between 5 and 10 years, the continuum. Children, she says, on the other hand, don't have that luxury because they haven't made sense of the world they live in yet. So when they have an experience of the other side and then they come back to this realm, they're like, well, why is nobody behaving accordingly? And it's a disconnect and a disorientation that she says they then take upon themselves very often, and then they think they're the weird ones and they don't fit in, and then they start hiding their experiences and being shy about it. And that's, I feel, very much my story, because I can't say I had a near-death experience because I asked my mom and she has no stories that match that. But at the same time, I know I've been physically, or at least tangibly, in my soul present at the other side. I have distinct impressions. I had that homesickness, like there's more to this life. There is a place I am missing, and it was more than a imagination. And I also obviously had a spiritual connections with the other side, where people would come and visit me. And the intuitive side, the mediumship side, was completely like a taboo. Like I was uncomfortable with that. And so it was difficult for me to make sense of myself. And that, I think, led to the topic being bigger and weightier than it needed to be, which is why I was so compelled to write a children's book on it when I was a grown up and I had children of my own. But throughout life, I have touched the other side, and the other side has touched me. Like, I am an artist and I paint people, and I find that it's easiest for me to paint people that have already passed on, because I can connect with their souls and they can give me information and I can get their real essence. And the portraits are, we have great conversations and great experiences. And now I'm finally comfortable with that. It took me, I mean, decades to finally be comfortable with that, because having been a child like I just described, I thought I was the weird one. So I had to outgrow the fact that I was weird and outgrow that these things were happening to me, and then stuff them in the corner and say, no, I'm normal, it's not happening. And so I am, obviously making sense out of my own spirituality and the experiences. But there's one thing I wanted to mention about this children's book too, because having not had an official or a near-death experience that I can point to, and yet having had all the symptoms that people who have had one had, I felt, on the one hand, compelled to write this book, but on the other hand, really struggling with the fact, well, who am I to represent the other side when I haven't seen it with my own eyes? And I've stood there and said, those are the crystal cities, those are the beings of light, these elements that people come up with. And so for a long time, I was struggling with that, saying, who am I to say what it looks like, so that people can say, well, she said it looks like this, and therefore we have to believe her. That question found its own answer, because I realized the other side is a spiritual realm. It's energetic, and it takes, from what I realized, it shapes itself in an unconditional love to the consciousness of the viewer, the person entering it. And so it's very much a world of vibration, a world of feeling, and not a world of facts like we're used to over here. So in the end, I ended up painting the other side and the representation of the spiritual realm based on how I felt and how my own experiences have allowed me to feel it and receive the vibration or the joy and the colorfulness and all that. But it's not a factual representation of, okay, now you're going to turn left, and then you're going to turn right, and then you're going to go to this roadmap, because that's what happens on this side of the coin, right? The other side is our own experiences will interpret. So my wish with this book is that as you, the reader, read it, that you begin to recognize your own internal spiritual language represented, the colors, the vibrations, the feel of it, and let that then become your cue to have your own experiences and recognize the truth of it because of who you are and what you've lived through, rather than what some other person has experienced for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And because the experiences are so individual, like there are the common themes, the common things that happen within a near-death experience or an out-of-body experience, or, there's so many different types of spiritual experiences, but they're so unique. And they're not all the same. They aren't a roadmap, like you say. That's something that we do here.
But there's fundamental truths about it, such as that unconditional love, your sentence being heightened, and the instant knowledge dumps. And I've had a lot of those in my life, where I've just been always naturally very spiritually inclined and done a lot of soul searching, studied pretty much all of the world's major religions, and just to get that language to be part of my own. And whenever I've touched the other side, I remember the knowledge dumps would be instant, and then it would take me a lot of time to sort out what I was just given in information, to put all that in a row. And the same thing is happening when I do my artwork, and I paint people that I am able to connect with intuitively, and I will instantly know something about them that I then have to piece together and share with the person that I'm painting it for. And there's usually a really deep healing element with that. Like for example, so I was painting, I guess I'm saying that as well, because in the book I am talking about how when you're on the other side, you can meet deceased loved ones, and they're, as alive as you've ever known them, because their souls are still just connecting with you. And again, who am I to, paint that for you? And I am not putting out, wishful thinking for children, because these are experiences that I myself have had as a portrait artist. for example, I get commissions from people all around the world, and this one came from someone in Denver who I'd never met. And she sent me her photo, and I was painting. And at one point in the painting, I really felt compelled to play John Denver music. Now, I have listened to John Denver before, so I had some CDs sitting around. I put them on, and I just couldn't quit. It was just playing and playing, and it started to sound really intense. Like the songs were just constantly making me aware that I love my lady and I miss her, but I am just still in love with her. You know how he sings, these phrases kept hitting my head. And I was like, you know what, this is no longer just music for the background. I feel like I'm receiving a communication from the person that I was painting. So this is in the beginning of me getting used to this. The way spirit is really just part of our everyday life, and accepting that I had these abilities. And so I ended up sitting down and biting the bullet for me. And I wrote down, and I wrote the person that had commissioned the portrait, and I said, I feel that he is communicating to me that he's still very much in love with you still. And even though you must miss him a lot, he says, please don't miss me because I'm still so close to your life. And so I translated what I had picked up in the songs and sent it to her. And so she wrote me back crying. She said every morning at 10 a.m. she took their doggies for a walk, listening to John Denver songs and just crying and crying and missing him. And I was like, I think the message here is weird to just not miss him quite so much, because he's really trying to get through to you that he's around, he's with you, he's aware, he's loving you. He just doesn't have his physical self, but he is really still loving you the same way. And so that was a very healing moment. And for her, for me, a realization that I don't have to know people in order to pick up on them, because it's not coming from my subconscious or from my where I put my attention. There's a real communication that happens between people that have no physical body and people that do. The two realms are very integrated. And so I have a whole list of stories over the years, as a result of, I guess, me finding my own voice and my own way of doing things that have proven to me beyond a doubt that the two halves are one whole. We have a spiritual self, we have a physical self, and they're meant to be integrated. And it is a continuum that I feel this book will introduce you to, so that you can begin to, if you haven't already, then you can begin to introduce that into your life with greater confidence, because that brick wall that we hit, that is death, that is the end, that's not true.
Yeah. Oh, I just think it's really, really great. I think about children, going back to children, I think a lot of their early experiences might be with a pet dying, or a grandparent, or something close. But yeah, it's such a unique journey. I can't quite explain what I'm thinking there, what I'm feeling. I'm interested to know, Marie Antoinette, you said you had your own children. How have you talked to them about death and dying?
I've just introduced it as a continuum, and that's how they've always related to it too. Just that, I believe, almost like the socks you put on in the morning every day, our bodies are like that sock for our soul. Our soul is in this body, but our body is the vehicle we use to experience this life and to, express ourselves and participate in the adventure, but that we are more than our bodies. And so I've always just raised them with that idea that, when people die, they're freed from their body, but their soul goes to a realm where it's just spirit. And, my understanding deepened over the years, and I now see that it's not some realm far away, which actually it's one of the lessons that I received through my paintings. Yeah, but to follow up, my children are just naturally aware of that. They know that death is a doorway, that they see it as, it's a shedding of your physical self, but then you enter your spiritual self. And so they were raised with that. And that leads me to this story, because I was sleeping one night, and I'm from the Netherlands. That's where I grew up. And even though I live in the United States, my mom has a friend there still who lost her husband. And I was aware of her since she, crossed my path in my childhood, but I had no contact with her. And her husband showed up in my dreams. He's the one who had passed away about 2 years previous. And he showed up in my dreams, and he was reaching out. And like I mentioned, that instant dump of knowledge, he didn't really speak, but there was an instant communication with it. So I immediately understood in that appearance that he wanted me to paint him so that I could connect with his wife, who was still living in the Netherlands, that he was well, he was alive, and he was connecting with her, but he couldn't get through. And I even understood why in that communication, even though, like I said, no sentences were spoken. The information was that she was grieving so hard, because grief, I believe, is really the barrier that people have to overcome, because it separates that from this, and it makes that division, that barrier, more artificial, and they cannot feel the continuum so well that I'm speaking about, or that I'm introducing in this book. And she was stuck in that grief, and the dilemma for her was, even though she was very spiritually minded and had a rich connection to spirit, she felt that if she connected to her husband on the other side, he would surely be stuck. He would be a soul that never made it into the heavenly realms, because he was still hovering around her, and she didn't wish that for him. She didn't want him to be a stuck soul. So she said, I can't connect with him. If he is in the light, if he is in heaven, that's surely far away, because look at how broken this world is. It doesn't feel very heavenly and very light. So she, in her mind, had placed him really far away in some heavenly realm, that, where she wished him to be very well, well off in heaven. But she was missing him so, and she wanted him to be close. And the dilemma was that if she wished that, she would turn him into a stuck soul that had to be part of the mundane. So that caused her a real heartache and a very big grief. And so he couldn't get through. And because from the other side, there's just unconditional love, and it just, showers with love and grace and blessings, as I've experienced it. So I ended up painting him, and his painting, in the painting, he's full of light, he's submerged in light, and he's reaching out with his hand, a butterfly, just to kind of make the connection to our physical realm. Now, my style, as you can tell, with this book is colorful. So I tried to put that butterfly as colorful as I could, all the colors I could throw in there. And every time I did, I would feel this pressure in my heart that I was going in the wrong direction. So I had to listen to that. And then I just ended up making it a very monochrome painting with just light shades of golden yellow and a white butterfly. So, and then it felt complete. So by the time, this is 2 months before, then I heard from my mom that she was going to come visit. So I'm sure that all that was, again, being orchestrated from behind the scenes by her husband as well, just giving her the feeling that she should come and visit. So she came and visited my mom, who lives in the United States, with me. So I had the painting for 2 months, just as a surprise, waiting for the right time. And she came over, and I offered it to her at that point. Of course, she was blown away, and she was crying. And at that point, she confirmed that she had exactly had that problem that I had mentioned, that she couldn't connect with him because it would be a violation of him being in the light or in heaven. And she didn't want him to be a stuck soul, which left her very alone and abandoned. And seeing him like that, reaching out to her, and having reached out to her through me in my dreams, she said, oh my gosh, for the last 2 months, I have been followed in my garden by a white butterfly. And that was on the other side of the world. And it's those kind of stories that show you, we all have moments like that, but our rational mind comes in and says, well, there's white butterflies everywhere. Or, you know what I mean? The context, the way that these, you have to use a language. And her husband from the other side used that language. And when the pieces fall into place and the puzzle fits so beautifully, you just know you can't make that up with your rational mind. And you can doubt it, but you don't want to, because the healing that happens is so profound. And at that point, that's how spirit speaks to us. That's how it shows up in our physical lives. And that's the language that I hope to either wake up or keep alive in children, as they understand that there is a continuum to our realm, so that their life's a little bit more magical, and they don't have to worry about that existential dread that's gripping so many teenagers with the emptiness of life nowadays, with the way it's,
exactly.
broken.
Oh my goodness, I just felt that she doesn't want to keep him stuck, but she wants to embrace him and have him. Oh, that's quite weighty, actually. Oh gosh, I love stories like that too. The white butterfly. Imagine if you just pushed through and given her a big painted, bright, beautiful, painted, colorful butterfly. And
that's the thing.
It's about tuning into the littlest things in the everyday life, isn't it?
Yes, that was definitely my part of it, because all these experiences, they have something for me to learn as well. And I have had to learn over the course of my life to not let my rational mind do all the decisions, because that's what I would have done with that colorful butterfly. I would have decided from my rational mind or from my ego that that's how it needed to be. But my soul is more subtle, and that was where the truth was hiding. So I think that's what we all are on that journey, I think it's what we all share in common, that we let our soul speak a little bit more and that we trust the continuum. And again, that's my hope with the book.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think it's absolutely great. You hear of a lot of people who they lose a partner or a loved one, and they so desperately just want to have the contact. And maybe somebody else who's maybe not so desperate gets that contact.
Yeah.
It's something when you were talking about how they couldn't get through.
Yes, I've noticed that myself as well. It's the heavier feelings, the grief, the loss, the pain that need to be worked out in our physical self, because they hijack our biochemistry almost, so that we are not in that free space, that the right brain just make the connection and to let the information land. But it doesn't mean they're not trying or that the connection isn't there.
Yeah, I think that's a really big part of it.
I've actually found through my experiences that when you miss them the most and you're just aching for that connection, and at the conclusion of the rational mind at that point is they're not here because I'm missing them. So I found the exact opposite to be true, that at that moment they are the closest. They are so here that you feel and breathe them, but you're just not landing that last little bit where you accept that they're here because you don't understand how they are here. And therefore, when you miss them the most, they are actually here and they're the closest. And it's just a switch in your mind that then, needs to just let go of how that is and whether you understand it or not, and then let that unfold and let the signs come and let the openings, show up for you.
Absolutely.
Like you said, if for children, you really need to simplify and own the topic. And I feel that's part of my training for the last 20 years, because this book, I wanted it to write for such a long time. It's only now just out, but in all that, all these topics that we're briefly touching on, there's somewhat, even sometimes with only a page represented in this book. But the life review, the fact that you don't really bargain your way into heaven, but that it's an unconditional support for our souls, and the fact that you never lose who you love, and that they are there connecting with you, and that they are still very much alive without a physical body. That your pets are accessible to you. We're touching on them bit by bit, but these are big topics, and the truth of it, the essence of it is in the book, but yeah, there's so much to grasp on all of it. There's so much to let go of in our own, rational minds, in our wanting to be in control, that the more you can accept the soft side of yourself that just knows, and then let that integrate with you, the more you will feel and verify for yourself that realm and how close it feels to you. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think if we can just have the conversation, understand all the different elements and aspects, and at the same time, like I said earlier, understand that they're unique, they're independent of each other. We don't necessarily follow the roadmap. We don't necessarily have a checklist of this happens, this happens, this happens, because it is a different journey, which is probably based on our life that we've lived, based on our purpose,
I would say,
spirit calling, all of these different types of things. Yeah, it's very, very interesting. I really hope it opens up the conversation. That's what I feel on my heart for so much of the work that I do. It's about opening the conversation around death, about making it more everyday, which is actually a really hard thing. And I don't want to underestimate grief. Grief is so important, I think.
I agree.
Grief is painful, it's awful, but it's really important to
And thank you for saying that, because I also don't mean to say these are the heavier feelings standing in the way and therefore get rid of them. No, I think that is very much the way that we close the chapter physically, because it's our body setting all these pieces in place. And I do actually believe that grief is the language of the body in letting go. And grief does not belong to the spiritual dimension, because there's an instant oneness and an instant healing of the love and the support. But that does not mean that grief is not essential. I think it's the way our physical bodies process the change.
And it's such an important thing to go through. We can't just push it away, because I think it'll resurface and resurface, and
then you end up living in the past too. Yeah, because that past needs to be processed through the grief.
To bring us into the present and understand our moments and our purpose and all these types of things. Do you think there are any other books looming around?
I do go by inspiration, and I feel that if I am meant to write it, the inspiration will come. So I'm kind of waiting for an assignment, so to speak, from
Yeah.
you know from that spiritual realm, from my inner self. And I haven't received one other than writing these theories down that I have developed over to help our as adults understand how we navigate our spiritual selves and our physical selves more gracefully without having to attach it to a dogma or an existentialist concept. It's all such extremes. It's you either have to be this or you have to be that, but there's
Yeah. What about
so
in
much flow
between?
in between. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
I
that's
like
where my
that.
passion is. Yeah.
I often find that I can't quite agree to the extremes, and I'm like, well, I agree this and
Yeah.
then a bit of this, and
Yeah.
it's a smorgasbord of
Yeah.
things. I'm always a
And
bit
we all know
skeptical
so
and
much more than we have found a place for. I think
yeah,
more and more people are just naturally aware of their spiritual language, and they're finding validation, some in this path, some in that path, and it's making such a smorgasbord of like spiritual tools that we now kind of navigate life with. And so I think the language is opening up for all of us. I think the discussions will come. I think
yeah,
we'll begin to take it back, because our life has been so bleak. Our world has been so bleak for so long, having kind of dismissed that side of ourselves when science took so much power and debunked so much about our spiritual natures. And I think we're ready to take it back. Wouldn't you think? Like, in a
yeah.
way that,
We need to. The conversation needs to.
yes,
Well, it's even starting for a lot of things. It needs to start. It needs to grow, and that's why I think it's so great that you're starting with younger people.
thank you.
The earlier we can start the conversation. I love how you said my
Yeah,
kids have just been raised in
yeah,
understanding that
yeah,
death is a thing. Yeah.
yeah.
So Marie Antoinette Kelley, thank you so much. It has been wonderful. I think your work's really meaningful, really important. I'd love to see this
Thank you.
conversation growing in everyday schools, education systems.
Yeah.
I just think what you're doing is fabulous. So thank you so much. It's wonderful to talking about death as well with children. And
Yes.
yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I feel like I could talk to you for days, and I've really enjoyed this conversation because